I hope all of you all came via Florida, where it's not raining. Talked to a good friend of mine just recently, said it's lovely down there. But I want to call the meeting to order. And first on the agenda is that we need to approve the meeting agenda.
Make a motion that we approve of the meeting agenda.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next, we're going to jump down to presentations, which is item number 3. And we have board member comments, Mr. Snow.
Have a couple, very brief. I wanted to compliment Dr. Murray in the Debate Middle School site-based council meeting. The parents and teachers worked together well. It was good discussion. They updated policy and they kind of joked at me somewhat during the meeting. It made it fun. My name's Smiley. I appreciate that. They did an excellent job as a meeting. Second thing I wanted to mention, and Lori's not going to be happy with me when I say this, but I wanted to recognize her. She met with the city commission and explained the light system. If you didn't read it in the paper, she explained how we could make things safer on Main Street, and she's one of ours, and we're proud of her. Can we give her a round of applause? That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Bob?
No. Nothing.
Lori?
Just say I know our middle school academic team has been working really hard, and these competitions, you think they would be, in and out. Our basketball team goes and competes for an hour at a time, but these academic tournaments are all day long, and Mr. Harney works really hard with those teams, and he sends us long updates, but I have to say our team is doing very well, and those kids, though, are out the door at 7 in the morning, and they don't get home till 7 at night, and it's all day long, and keeping those kids, middle schoolers, energized and on task is a feat as well, so just congratulations to them and all our other teams.
Some days are longer than that.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that it's been a good December. A lot of hard work's going on in the school district. It's been amazing just how many positives we have, and it truly makes a difference in our community. Also, we got a card today. Merci beaucoup. How y'all like that? For another delicious and fun Christmas brunch. We had the retired seniors, not seniors, but retired teachers and staff over for a nice brunch. And Cheryl Gibson, who used to be Cheryl Kerball, sent this note. Your gracious hospitality deserves an A+ from this retired teacher. It was a wonderful event. It's always nice seeing people that have gray hair like me, and they're just, our former staff and folks are they're just good people, and they definitely thank everybody who did the food, which absolutely was fantastic. So that. Also, I do want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone. Tonight's just a crud night. So, but it's just been a good half year so far, and keep up the great work and have fabulous time with your families. It's well deserved, so thank you all. Dr. Oh, any other, Troy? Okay. All right, we're gonna go to the superintendent comments.
Okay, I have several tonight, so kind of bear with me for just a second, but just to the board members, my calendar's uploaded. They're an e-meeting for you to view for the past 30 days. One other thing that I uploaded there was the safety story. So, and it looked like this, by the way, for everybody. But what this is where Kentucky Center for School Safety was running a campaign and trying to get individuals in our state to go online and pledge for safe schools, and to really, for each person to exemplify kindness, unity, and empathy. Across the state there were 71,000 individuals that pledged, but here at Danville schools alone we had 1,000 individuals that pledged for the safe schools. And so I thought that was a great thing about our employees and our students and then parents and community members that went on and pledged that for our school system. So it was really great. And then another announcement we have, I'm not sure, it was supposed to be released today, so this may actually, maybe this hasn't hit the news yet, but our own Sherry Satterley, and Sherry is here somewhere. Mrs. Satterley, are you, am I missing? There you are, I was missing you. So Mrs. Satterley was accepted to Quail. Quail is Kentucky Women in Educational Leadership. It's a pretty big honor to be accepted into this group. The only way to be a member is to be a female superintendent or actually be inducted into the program. She was nominated and through a very rigorous application process was accepted. She will be inducted to Quail on January the 23rd. So very proud of her. We also got a grant from KDE for $1,000 to implement our new standards. So 10,000, yeah, 10,000, I'm so sorry. 10,000, so that's why Mrs. Satterley is so great, is keeping me straight. $10,000 to help us, the majority of that is going to get us stipends to our teachers as they work on implementation for our new standards, so that was a really good thing. I also want to call out kudos to our cafeteria staff, to Mrs. Patty as well. So we are now serving snack at the high school to students after school, and we're averaging about 150 a day there.
And
so
more.
yeah, do you want to make any? Yeah, I just think it's
awesome.
I just think it's great. A lot of our bus riders, we actually have some students from Bate Middle School that are headed over for athletic practices that are also picking up snack at the high school. So extremely proud of our cafeteria staff for doing that and providing that afternoon snack. A lot of our students are going into practice, or they're headed to games, or they're just getting on a bus, and that snack means a lot. So I want to say kudos to that entire group and everybody that's worked on that. It's really amazing. Our dental room is open. If you're not aware, we did cleanings in the month of December, somewhere around 90 students, including some Bates students, which in our old program we didn't have that available to middle schools. So proud of that, and that's up and running. And then really quickly, I know we got a lot, but I'll mention a couple of things with sports. I want to mention esports. So that's something new that we added this year. Just kind of let you know how that's going in their first year. We have 2 League of Legends teams. It's 14 players that are on that. That team's record is 8 wins and 4 losses, which currently has them ranked 13th in the state going into their final day of the season, which is on Tuesday. The top 16 advance to the state playoffs. So right now, going into that final round, looks like maybe we'll be headed to state playoffs, which is really great. We have a second team with a bunch of our younger players. This is a middle school and high school team, and they are at a 4-8 currently. So, but they are really improving and working hard, and that's a lot of our younger players. So we're really proud of them as well. Our girls basketball is currently 4-1. They are playing tonight in Mercer County. Boys and girls basketball teams packed bags for backpack for kids over the weekend. So not only great athletes, but also really working for the community. So very proud of them for doing that extra work over the weekend. Our swim team has a home meet with Bull County January 4th, and then our wrestling team actually has quite a few matches over the holiday break. So even though it's break, they're going to be out at matches during that time. So a lot going on in our school over the last month through the rest of December, and really proud of everything that's going on in our system right now.
Thank you. Great report. Okay, we're going to do student and volunteer recognitions. Dr. Murray, we'll start with you since you are the closest.
First, we'll start with some volunteers. These volunteers are actually work with the Beacon on our advisory council. So I'll let Ms. Myers speak about our 2 that are here.
So the first, the Beacon Advisory Council member that I'd like to recognize is Michael Spears. And Michael is an advisory council veteran. I had to dig awfully deep to find his original date of appointment to the council. And he actually dates back to July of 2012. So he has been involved with the Beacon and with the Youth Services Center for many years. He has served as the chair of my council for all 4 years that I have been a Beacon staff member, and contributes not only from his expertise in the area of mental health, but also now as the parent of one of our Bate Middle School students. So thank you, Michael, for your dedication. And then the other volunteer that we have with us this evening is Melissa Walls. And Melissa actually joined the Beacon's Advisory Council. She and I became parts of the Beacon at the same time. She came along in August of 2016, which was when I was hired on as the Beacon liaison for Danville Schools. And Melissa is so passionate about the well-being of our students from birth all the way through high school graduation. She puts forth so much effort and contributes such great ideas when it comes to programming for the good of our students and their families. So thank you, Melissa. Yes. I was gonna say, you can hop in.
All right, so the next thing we have is student recognitions, and these are students that, as sixth graders last year, were distinguished in all of their tests that they took for K-Prep. So that's our students that are here today. First, we have Maggie Schomer. We have Kendall Williams. Abe Goodwin. Brooklyn Brown. Hadley Terrell. And we've got a few students that I don't think are here, but I want to go ahead and name their names. Ben Tibbles, Rylan Montgomery, Paul McClure, Yoselin Martinez, Andrew Lamb, Sam Finke, and Anna Sparrow, and Emery Lombino.
If parents want to come in and take pictures, it's fine. Thank you all.
Kind of continue with
Mr. Elmore.
Kind of continue with the Beacon theme. Mr. Myers is here. I don't know that our two parents, but if you want to come up, we'll go ahead and recognize those individuals. I don't know, but Christmas is a busy time for the Beacon. She's busy, busy, busy. And so these individuals were instrumental in helping along the way. So she wants to speak with them just about it a little bit.
Yes, just in case they snuck in behind me. Jeff Haviland and Kelly Cooper are actually two brand new members to the Beacon's Advisory Council. Both are parents of freshman students at Danville High School and have been fantastic contributions as new members to the council, and we appreciate their dedication. Both are very active and involved in their child's education and in support of their extracurriculars and other activities. And so the fact that they take even more additional time to contribute to the well-being of other students in our building as well, we appreciate them, and we'll definitely make sure that that they get their certificates. I'm sorry they couldn't be with us this evening.
Thank you. Also, I've asked Mr. Dean, we're going to recognize some students. One of the things we're trying to do is have students take ownership for their learning. We can meet transition readiness in many different ways. AP classes, dual credit classes, one of those industrial certifications. And so Mr. Dean has gone above and beyond and continues to do that, looking for opportunities for students. And we have some that have found success. We want to recognize those individuals tonight.
So, the marketing pathway, one of the ways you can reach transition readiness is through the ASK Fundamentals of Marketing exam. And when you look at the national pass rate, only about 20% of people in the nation pass this exam. So I think it's a true achievement for these students that have met that. And moving on in their academic careers, if they choose to go into business, a lot of colleges will award academic credit for this certification. So it's a huge plus all the way around for those students. So I'm going to go on to recognize these IKEA Burgess. Trey Dawson.
All right, Trey.
Hunter Baxter. Then I think we have a few that, there's Ella, she snuck in on me. Ella McKinney. And then we have Sam Lynch, who is at work, and Taylor Ballard, who is also at work right now.
Thank you so much.
All right, all right.
Let's slide down for a second.
Here you go.
Make sure you get IKEA.
And I'd also like to point out we have 39 more students taking the health sciences pathway on Wednesday, so hopefully we'll have some more in here.
All right, all right. All right.
Next, we have the personnel notifications. Have all the board members taken a look at that? And then if there are any questions or things comments, just get a hold of Dr. McDonald. So that'll be fabulous. The next item is minutes of the previous meeting. We need a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we have the auditor's report.
This is Steve Roy. He works for Styles, Carter, and Associates.
Okay, Steve, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I might have just enough voice to get through this, but I'll run through a few high points of the financial statements and the audit report. First of all, thanks to Teresa and her staff for making this timely and efficient, and we're getting it done, as well as Patty, who I worked more closely with. The district received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, and the district is complying with all accounting requirements. Unmodified just means it's a clean opinion. The district's audit report contains a section entitled Management's Discussion and Analysis. If you didn't read any of the rest of the report, you could read this and get a good idea of what's in there. It's kind of a condensed version of the financial statements, some comparisons, current year, prior year, just for analysis and clarity. The general fund had $2.76 million in cash at the end of fiscal year 2019, and during the year, general fund cash decreased by $1.6 million. The general fund's revenues were $68,000 less than expenditures, and the general fund balance decreased by $1.2 million during the fiscal year to $3.07 million. The food service fund had $130,000 in cash at the end of the fiscal year, and during the year, the food service fund cash decreased by $51,000. The district, like all school districts in the state, are required to record its financial statements a proportionate share of the total unfunded pension liability of the County Employees Retirement System, CERS. For 2019, the total unfunded pension liability statewide was $6.1 billion, and the district's proportionate share of this was $6.89 million. The district also records in its financial statements a proportionate share of the total unfunded OPEB liability of the County Employees Retirement System and the medical insurance portion of the Teachers Retirement System. For 2019, the total unfunded OPEB liability statewide for CERS was $1.8 billion. The district's proportionate share of this was $2 million, and the total unfunded OPEB liability for TRS medical insurance was $3.5 billion. The district's proportionate share of which was $6.24 million. The district has $57.54 million in capital assets at historical cost, and at the end of the 2019 fiscal year, the net book value of these assets was $33.8 million. The district also had $26.7 million in bonds outstanding at June 30th, 2019, and the amount payable on this in 2020 under these obligations is $1.3 million. So again, thanks for the opportunity to serve as the independent auditor for the district. It's been a pleasure. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to address those.
Well, I got the page 72. Not kidding. There's 85 pages in the report. I did get to read most of it.
Yeah.
Just your overall feeling on how we're doing, where we are.
Well, the scope of our audit is really to make sure to issue an opinion on whether the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. As far as that goes, yes, and that's where that unmodified opinion comes in.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Thank you so much. Very thorough. Okay, next we have up under reports with the CSIP for Danville High School. Mr. Elmore.
So you all have that for, do they have it, Ms. McDonald? We do. Yeah, as required, since we are an ATSI school, we are kind of required to present you with our CSIP and make sure that you sign off on it and approve it. I guess the easiest way is just talk about each goal specifically, and so I'll spend just a little bit of time. I won't spend a lot unless you have questions. But the first goal there is proficiency goal. This deals with math and reading proficiency. It'll be measured by our sophomores this year. You can see at the top we do have the goal is a 5-year goal. It tells you where we stand, which is the first percentage of the number based on where we would like to be in a 5-year span. Then you break down to the objective. It actually breaks it down to a 1-year plan, I guess you would say. Also, if you look at strategies and activities, this includes anything that is occurring at the school level that we put on here. We have to make sure that we are doing that. For example, we just had a co-teacher training, which was, and I'll reference it throughout the plan, was Friday. And so this is an area of focus with our population that we're trying to support, not only all the students, but support. And so that's one of the things you see. Also, one of the things, if you look at the first activity there, was the school RTI team. We're providing support to students in reading and math, and that's all students in reading and math. And these activities actually support that goal and that objective. Any questions there?
I just wanted to make a comment. When I read that, I want to make sure, CSIP, does that stand for Cooperative Strategies in Place? Or what does it stand for?
Consolidated School Improvement Plan.
Okay.
Yeah, this is our improvement plan.
When I read that, I just wanted to share with you that the general education teacher with the lead role, the special ed teacher modifying assignments, providing student accommodations, and the special ed teacher would provide input to the regular teacher. Seeing both of them work together, I think is an outstanding program.
It is, you've seen in history, you've seen the collaborative model, which actually when I was in the classroom took place. Now it's a co-teach, and really we kind of learn something new every day. There's 6 different ones that we'll be using. We're looking at a station. We're also looking at parallel. And if you'd like, we can go into more depth at another time, because we'll provide updates periodically. I know Mr. Ball has been in attendance at our site-based meeting twice, and so we'll be discussing that along the way as well. So, but you're exactly correct. Working together to meet the needs of all students. Excellent. Proficiency, or goal number 2 is a separate academic. This is actually in science and writing. This will be our juniors this year. You can see there the first number is where we currently stand, and then a second is a 5-year goal. They're specific for science and in writing. The writing there is an on-demand writing piece that they'll complete, and the science is the end-of-course assessment they'll take. You see the objective. It actually breaks it down to a 1-year goal, and so these are goals that we focus on. We don't, let me be honest, we don't sit here and say, hey, we got to get this, but we do want to make sure we're providing supports to students. And we do monitor data to see where students are, whether it be MAP data or CERT data, also with formative assessments that are occurring in the classroom as well. Any questions there about that separate academic indicator? The other one is achievement gap. As you know, we do need to make up the achievement gap. It's here. It's also prevalent not only in the state but also in the nation. So we do want to focus on that. You have a reading and a math goal there for those separate groups. You can see where we are percentage-wise, and then 80 is kind of a standard measure that you use, moving up to that in 5 years. You have the objective there, so it shows where we are currently and where we would like to be this time, actually when scores are released there. And so this includes your reading and your math as listed at the top. It also has activities and also progress monitoring that occurred. It also talks about the length of time or how often you actually monitor those. For example, we discussed CERT or ACT prep last time, so we'll have it 2 times. The next time we'll have it will be mid-January. And so we'll provide support for students. You also see there with ESS, one of the things that we do is we have ESS for all subjects on different days of the week. But also with reading and math, we do have individuals who come in during the day and work with our students in reading and math. Focus group, I guess you would say, based on the progress monitoring that has occurred. Any questions about achievement gap? Transition readiness, which is goal 5. This is our students prepared for life after high school. Several different ways you can reach this, and I'll kind of summarize it. The 2 big focus ones are, of course, we know about ACT benchmark in reading and math, or actually it's math and or reading or English. And that's why you hear students say, hey, how they score on ACT, not only for college but also for these benchmarks, as well as we provided actually last week Coyote, which is a recognized intervention. You have instruction before that, and we actually had 6 kids meet it last week. And we actually have another 6 that will be taking it Wednesday because they scored within 1 point. So we're providing those opportunities, encouraging those students to find success. And it's not, again, just about the test. It's about doing the best that you can in anything, and we voice that to them continuously. So I wanted to mention that. 62.4 is where we currently are. Our goals will be up around 69.9. And so we do have information there where we kind of keep track of how students are doing. We talk to them about those. We talk to them more importantly about what they want to do after high school. Because most of these individuals in this category are your seniors. And do they want to go to college? Do they want to get an industrial certification? Do they want to go into workforce? What does it look like? And so those are the kind of conversations that we are having. This also, they can become transition ready by meeting industrial certification. You just saw 7 of those students there. Or actually mentioned 7 of those students. And so that's another thing we want to provide support to them. We'll have, like I said, another 38 students that will be taking the NOCTI, which is a healthcare pathway or industrial cert, that they could reach that certification. So we even have some freshmen and sophomores that could go ahead and get that completed as they move through high school. They don't just have to wait till their senior year. Last one, which is graduation rate. As far as the goal goes, increased graduation rate from 93.6 up to 100% by 23-24. You can see what our 1-year goal there is. And let me also say that it's not just about graduating students. The way I look at it is you look at graduation rate, you want it to be high, but also you want that transition rate to be high. If there's a big gap in between, it means your graduating individuals are not prepared for the workforce and don't have necessarily the soft skills. And so that's a big focus too. Talks about focusing on attendance and tardies. Basically, again, those soft skills that employers look for. Make sure they're showing up for work, make sure they're on time, as we work through that as well. So graduation rate, it's a 4- and 5-year cohort, so students do have 5 years once they enter to graduate. We always think about it being a 4-year, but they do allow for students who complete that 5th year, then you can go back and get credit for them graduation-wise. The last part is special considerations for target support and improvement, which is TSI or ATSI. We were asked to kind of look and actually answer some specific questions. Here, I'd just like to talk about each section very quickly. Components of a turnaround: leadership, development, and support. We are using an 8-step process to guide us through this, and that's where we actually implement something, and you have a copy of it, and then evaluate what that is as we walk through it. Mr. Bandura, who is actually here, I've asked him and Mr. Dunn to be here tonight. They actually, I didn't even have to ask them, let me say that, because it's a team effort. It's not just myself, that also includes staff and everybody. And so he's here. If you should have any questions, he'll help us with that. Also, I've attached a DHS ATSI strategy sheet. You should find this included. If not, I'll give it to you. But this really breaks down the focus for the ATSI groups, what we're going to be doing and what we've done. It goes all the way up through May of next year as far as activities that we occurred, supports that we requested from the state. One just recently, last Monday and Tuesday, we had a diagnostic review, and we'll plan to get some information back about mid-January to end of January in regards to that. That was volunteer. We weren't required to do it, but we volunteered ourselves for them to come in. They interviewed 4 parents, they also 4 students, they did surveys, they also did some observations. And look at any documents that we have. So that's a way for get feedback to say, hey, what are we doing? What are we doing well? What can we improve on as we move forward? One thing we want to do is that we do have focus on our improvement because it's better for the students, and we want to make sure we're not just trying to do everything at one time. Identification of critical resource inequities. This occurs when you look at budgets, as we'll discuss tonight here. Staffing allocations. Also, again, mentioned is the ATSI focus group, reference that, and also what kind of supports do we provide for special ed as far as staffing goes, as far as funding goes. And so that's in process that we work through in site-based. It already has started. I think that's a request about adding a special ed instructional aid assistant to support the students of Danville High School. Also, if you look, we have included there another reference to the ATSI strategy sheet. And then we also had to come up with an evidence-based intervention. You see information in regards to that, along with the very last part. It does talk about the narrative and the co-teaching focus that we do have, why we can use that as co-teaching. This will be submitted to you all, but also onto the state to show them what we are doing and when it is occurring. And it'll be reviewed monthly at a minimum. Any questions there?
Thank you for taking the bull by the horns. I think with you, when I went to the last site-based meeting, I saw that the teachers and students were buying in to what you're doing. And you can grade yourself and monitor yourself as you go along and see where you make changes if you have to make an improvement. So it's a good step forward, excellent step forward.
So, do you have any particular concerns still going on in your mind right now that you'd like for the high school to be focused in on more than just this, or do you think you're on the right pathway right now?
We talk, I guess Ms. Satterley and also Ms. McDonald, we have some very candid conversations. I'm a people person. I believe people make a difference. It's not necessarily a program. And I see it on a daily basis. When a student may not connect with me, they may connect with somebody else. The way I look at it is the more people we have on board, the better it is. Because everybody's not going to talk with me. And what we're seeing is, and I don't know if it's a concern, okay, but the conversations I have with parents or aunts, uncles, grandparents, is that it's all of us. You know, it's all of our job to educate. We're here together. It's not us against them. And the conversations I've had with parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents, like I said, is they're on board with that. You know, they understand that. And it's all of us working together to really not just do it at school, but also reach down. And I'm sure every principal here probably state the same thing. And anytime we can preserve people, whatever it looks like, whether it be the AmeriCorps, person that I've requested or the special ed aide, whatever it is, if they can make connections and support kids through that process and families in the process. And that's why we had Ms. Myers and her the parents there from the Beacon Group, because it serves such an important part, for the students of not Danville High School, but all Danville.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I do get to hear things and a lot of positives, and it just truly makes a difference. And I like the fact that you're looking into relationship building, because we're not going to do this unless we have everybody on board and willing to take a risk or willing to step forward and do things maybe out of their ordinary job or whatever it might be. So it's good to hear. This is really a good report, and I appreciate that.
Well, to finish with, there's something I've stated since day one with students and staff is that you always be heard, but it doesn't mean you get your way. And I think it's very important. I think it's very important, because sometimes tough decisions have to be made. And I try to keep that in my front and foremost. And when I talk to my staff, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Bender, and everybody else, we try to keep that in mind. And the more we can educate individuals on that, you all too have tough decisions to make. And so when you do that, you make that decision, but it's being heard is very, very important. And that's what we're really trying to do. Trying to be heard and make those adjustments, make those changes. And at the center always need to be students. That's the main focus. So.
I really like that you're hoping, getting the students involved in the process, because they may see, what ATSI, they may not understand what really in the world of education and state accountability, what that means and why should they care. But it really is important. It's going to help them in the long run. And I really like that you're also looking to other districts. I see you've got, a visit to another district, and I think that's important to reach out, because other people have gone through similar challenges and pulled themselves up. So I appreciate it.
It looks like the process is very inclusive.
Yeah.
And that helps.
It could be better, and we'll make those improvements, but you're right. We need to involve everybody in that process. We need to look outside to see if we need to make some adjustments. That's one of the reasons why the diagnostic review team came in, look at another school. Of course, every school is a little bit different, and you can't mimic it. You have to look and see how it fits here. And that's one of the things I like about Danville High School, to be very specific, is it's very small, staff and student-wise, and we're beginning to see that change, see those adjustments. But again, it's providing supports to those students to help them not only navigate academics, but life itself. So.
I just want to state that the team at the high school, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Bender, Mr. Elmore, have been working extremely hard, and I know that you're seeing that in the evidence and the documents in front of you, but they have just put endless hours into really getting this plan together. And Mrs. Satterley worked with them extensively too on this as well. And I just say it's a great team, and I think they're headed in the right direction, and they're focused, and I think we're going to see some great things from the high school, what we see going on right now.
Sure. We got a whole lot of extended family involved in it too. That makes a difference. Because it takes a village to raise a child.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. I appreciate that. Okay. We're going to revisit the BG1 for baked.
I don't think, Mrs. Denny, has anything changed from Monday to now? Okay, so we failed just to split down to consent, but would you like to ask her additional questions?
Well, I just, nothing's changed since then. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Okay. We'll get with you in a minute.
Do we need to formally approve the CSEP?
Yes.
The C, yeah, we just discussed that.
I make a motion for the approval of the CSEP for the Danville High School as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. So the HVAC report, it's
The
not...
BG1, there's not been any changes since
Okay.
Monday when Mrs. Denny presented on it, so the only thing we would need would be action unless you would like her to repeat any information unless you have questions.
Will you just do a short review for those that weren't here,
Yeah.
please? Thank you.
It is revising the BG based on what the bond sale actually was, and including the 3 units we go ahead and purchase those 3 remaining units and place them on the roof so that they can provide air conditioning in March, April, May, or January, you never know, when it could get hot. Because the compressor has failed on one of those, and we have about 8 spaces in that building with no air conditioning. and so to go ahead and purchase the units and place them with just the original ductwork until they begin phase 2 in the summer.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions? So we need a motion, please?
Make a motion for approval of the revised BG1 for Bay Middle School HVAC project as submitted.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So staffing report.
So there are two positions on there, and I'm actually going to ask Mr. Elmore if he doesn't mind to step back up here. So these are two positions for him. The one that says AmeriCorps, that won't be the actual title. College coach, I'm going to let Mr. Elmore explain. This is partially grant funded. The instructional assistant is actually just based on numbers, and of course that would be paid for out of special education dollars. But if you could give us just a brief, a little bit of information on the college coach.
Previous school district, we had a college coach was in place, and what this individual would do is actually they would focus on 15 to 20 students at each grade level, and really kind of go through a series of activities, I guess you would say kind of lessons with them on kind of a pull-out basis, trying to encourage them to go to college, and possibly look at what other options there might be. On top of that, besides those 60 to 80 students, they also can provide support to students in regards to FAFSA scholarship applications, those type of things. The reason why it's appealing to me is because it's not necessarily a matching, but we kind of pay part of it. They're actually an AmeriCorps employee. They take care of the benefits, the health insurance, other insurance that they offer, along with some loan forgiveness. And so sometimes that'll be a benefit for some of the applicants in regards to that. It's about a 35 to 40 hour a week job, and so this would be another resource that our students would have, another person they could go to. And actually, I'm just requesting from January to May of this year, and then we can kind of look at it and see if it's something we want to continue in the fall.
I think it's fantastic that AmeriCorps is involved.
One of the things you talked about earlier, excuse me, about preparing kids whether they want to go to college or go into some life skill. But one thing I see missing, what about the military option? Because that's another way that kids can get into a particular skill.
Exactly right. I just had a student in my office last week taking the ASVAB, practice ASVAB with a recruiter because he and a parents had requested it. So you're exactly right, it is a viable option. If you go to the state and tell them we want that to be transition ready, I'm all for it. They do offer, I believe now, if you complete 3 courses in ROTC, you can become transition ready, but anything as far as ASVAB or if you're enrolled in the Army or military, you don't get recognized for that. But it is an option that we have. Anytime students wants to meet with the Navy, Air Force, Army, National Guard, whatever, we make those arrangements. And actually we're looking at in January or February having a sign up for students who do want to take the ASVAB, which is a qualification exam for any of those. And I think that'll probably occur right at the end of January or February on a request basis. We're not going to make it all students take it, but it is an option.
I think in 2016, we had a young man that came back. He went to the Army Military Academy, graduated from there, and of course you have to be recommended by somebody in Congress to do that. And you never know, it might be a student that has good academics in one of the service military academies they can go to. And that's a very good option for them to go to, so that's something we can look into. We might have some candidates for that, you never know.
Any other comments? Okay.
Just as a reminder, this is paid for partly, or at least exactly half from AmeriCorps, so it's grant funded predominantly, and then the hospital's going to pick up another cost from January to May.
Okay, we need to approve this. We need a motion, please.
Make a motion that we approve of the staffing changes as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Ms. Osborne, finance reports.
You should have an attachment for November. You will see our beginning balance was $3,557,237.19. Total receipts were $6,497,025.93. Of course, we've been talking about taxes coming in. That number's big because so far we've collected 90% of our taxes.
Wow.
Of all the bills, we've collected 84% of the actual bills. So it's been really good. That leaves us ending balance at $8,142,573.47. Part 2, you'll see it's broken down by the funds, and then of course the bank reconciliation at the bottom. On the second page, I want you to pay attention to the payroll amount. The top part is accounts payable. Our payroll amount for expenditures is $1.3 million. The next page is all of our receipts, and you'll see what money has come in this month, and like I said, most of it is on tax revenue. And then the 5th page is our bank statement. Any questions? We've been very busy.
Very pleased about tax payments being made.
Jake and Mary Jo have done a great job.
And there's a lady in the back there who started that whole program. What year was that, Patsy?
Oh, gosh. Steve,
Was it
ask me that.
2005, something in there?
I have no idea. Did you want to mention that I started it kicking and screaming?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd hold off on that, but she did. It was quite interesting. But I will say this: once the board did pass that we were going to collect our own taxes, Mr. Rowland and Patsy Clevenger, they jumped in full force, and it has been successful from year one. And the over $1 million that we have saved not having to pay for a collection fee through the sheriff's department has been such a benefit. It's got to be $1.5 million by now, and quite a thing that it took place, because independent districts are the only ones that are allowed to collect their own taxes. And I wish we'd branch out and collect somebody else's taxes too, but anyways, but Patsy, I do thank you, and Teresa, thank you for your work.
Are people doing
Smiley.
a credit card? Sorry. People, I just was curious. 'cause
Not
last year we
much,
approved
because
that.
there's a fee on it.
Right.
But, yeah, we have a few.
And people are finding this building okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they have. We've even gone to the old building just to make sure, so.
Sorry.
No problem. For me, just a big thank you to the taxpayers. They support the schools, they go pay their taxes, and they pay them early. We've got tremendous support from the community.
Well, if you're kicking and screaming and I'm hurt, we got a medical place over the next door.
We do, but no, that's extremely good news.
Yeah.
So I think we'll hit that 99% or whatever we usually hit. Yeah, we're awfully close. Okay, so let's see here. We need to go on and approve the financial statement.
I make a motion that we approve the financial statement as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And motion carries. Thank you. Okay, payment of invoices.
You should have an attachment for the vendor bills. I just wanted to point out a few of them. On page 3, you'll see a bill for $1,800. That's our monthly water treatment amount. So I kind of wanted to show you that. Our sewer bill is on page 4 and 5. It's $13,960. That also is monthly. We had $583.26 on page 9. That was for locker replacements. The keys, the locks and keys for the high school, we do that every year. And then we had a big water valve that was replaced. It's also on page 9, $5,378 at Bate Middle. That was something unexpected. Our utility bill, you'll see it on page 13, $41,574. That's monthly. I thought this was kind of cool. Hogsett, this was paid by their project. They've got a little shed outside to put the toys and stuff, the yard toys. that was $3,060, but that was paid with project
I should
money.
say, yes, but it's also a requirement for preschool.
Yes.
So it seems cool and we smile, but then it actually,
Page 22, you'll see $1,891. That is for our girls' basketball. Got some uniforms. And that's all I picked out. Do you have any other questions?
I don't, anybody else have any questions or comments? So we need a motion, please?
I'll make a motion that we approve the payment of invoices as presented.
Second. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're gonna have a discussion on budget. And I'm gonna have Dr. McDonald run with it.
okay. While Mrs. Osborne is pulling up a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll start by just, I know that last Monday we talked briefly about process, and that in January we approved a draft budget. In May, a tentative budget, and then the working budget in September. So really, if we think about it, budget planning and the process is, it's really almost a year-long process, because as we approve the working budget for the fiscal year 19 in September, we actually had already started working on and planning for the 20, we actually started working on fiscal year 21, which is next school year. And so it really is a year-long process as we are planning and working forward. And so, and that, if you need a policy, it's in 4.1 and it kind of lists everything. But just as a reminder, we briefly talked about the process last week. And so I'm going to see, do we have it? Oh, you don't have, it's not pulled up in PowerPoint, so I can't click.
If you all want to turn around and follow the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
it's behind you, unfortunately, those who are there.
Out of your email maybe, or just pull it up from e-meeting. Oh, because it's in that. Okay. We'll just pull it back up and I'll just ask you when to slide to and from, which will make it a little bit more difficult. Because I guess to slide to the next one. So this is just, keep saying an agenda for this little tiny piece because I don't want to get confused with the agenda, but this is kind of what we're going to see and talk about throughout this presentation. Is we're going to have some just general budget information, just a little touch on the calendar because the calendar committee has been meeting and they've been discussing what the calendar looks like, and so kind of some information on how the calendar actually can affect our budget and have costs. Going to talk about payroll and then extra duty stipends as we go through the presentation. So a couple of things too. If I mention, just for the folks in the room, if you're not involved in school budgeting process, if I say FY20, that's this school year because May is of 2020. FY21 would be next school year, and so throughout you're going to hear a lot of all the way from back to FY 14 and 15 up through next year, FY21, which is what this budget process is all about. Teresa? One other thing too that I want to mention, and if you saw in the previous slide, I am actually weaving our strategic plan throughout this document. So as we go through slides, scroll it back just a little bit, please, to where, so as you see here, as we go through any place where we're having a discussion that falls into a goal area or a strategy area for our strategic plan, I have put that in the slide so we can see that it actually hits this area. So during a budget planning process, one of the things we have to do is a needs assessment. Like we have to figure out what our needs are, you know, how we're doing and what our needs are. So just a couple of things really across the year, but they do roll into any draft budget we do and in the conversations as we develop these are several places. So first, our strategic planning process and monitoring. As we went through last year, that strategic plan, and we developed that, we had parents and community members and students, and not to mention all of our employees, from teachers, custodians, you know, up to the directors and myself here at the central office that were involved in that. And through that, we looked at what our needs were and developed specific goals and detailed, prioritized strategies on how to improve our district. as well as that, this past July, we had a retreat with our principals and our directors, and through that retreat, we really, looked back at our strategic plan and what are our needs and what do we need to do to improve moving forward. One of the things we did at that retreat is we looked at our budget and how we were doing, and we looked at our budget over the past few years and what kind of trends we saw through our budget. After that, we started having a lot of very detailed meetings, September, October, and November during the planning process. Mrs. Osborne and myself, we've met with each of the principals and the directors individually to really look at what their budget was, what they were spending, what their needs were. We met with also a handful of district-wide employees. I know that we met with Ms. Dewey about our arts program and Mrs. Fisher about our athletic program, and so we've spent hours and hours, looking at what we've historically been spending, what's our revenue, what have we been taking in, and what are the needs of our district, and how do we improve. A couple of other places, you just heard about the high school CSIP, Consolidated School Improvement Plan. There are school level teams there. They're site-based, they're involved in some of that, and so they go through a pretty detailed needs assessment. We also do it with our district improvement plan, and of course site-based meetings are constantly working with their principals on what their needs are year-round, and site-based presents to the board in April, May. And then we also, you may not be aware, go through a needs assessment report with Perkins, and that involves community members. Mr. David Davis is leading that work currently, and it's a very detailed process to what we need. So we have a lot of different pieces, a lot of individuals involved in really looking at what are the needs of our district as we move into like what is the best draft budget for us to look at through the district. Please scroll. Share it, Mrs. Satterley, scroll up. Okay.
Try not to scroll too far.
So one of this is, I just threw this slide in there just to remind everybody. Probably the last year, and when we were in tax season, where we were setting our tax rate, one of the things that we talked about was that shrinking revenue from the state. So in this, I took this slide straight from this month's KSBA magazine, the School Advocate. You probably have already seen that as school board members. You received that magazine as well. But in 2008, the state contributed 60% of our revenue, and in 2018, it was 51%. I would assume for this year, FY20, it's more like, it's flipped. It's more like 49 us and 51, more like 49 the state and 51% us. So it's a huge difference over the last 10, 11 years in the funding that we're receiving from the state. So our revenue from the state has shrunk considerably. Mrs. Satterley. So as she slides back or tries to get there, so one of the things that, and we've seen this slide. So this slide I actually presented when we were working on our tax rate. And so here you see the end of the year balance, you see the beginning of the year balance, and then you see our general fund balance each month. And so lots of times, and I know you as board members, you may have got questions over the years that said, well, you ended the year with, 4.2 million, or you ended the year with 3 million, or whatever. It's like, oh, you're in good shape. But really what we have to think about is a cash flow issue. So we do not collect taxes across the summer and into the beginning of fall. And so if you'll notice the months that I have highlighted in yellow, that is where we see our general fund balance fall below our end of the year balance. And if you'll notice this year for FY20 in August, September, and October, we dropped down below $3 million in each of those months. So even if we think about that end of the year, knowing we have to have a cash flow in order to meet our monthly expenses until November hits when we start taking in taxes. We also sent our tax bills out early this year, and we did start collecting taxes slightly earlier than before, but probably about as early as we could get them out. We have several processes we have to go through and wait on information from the state, and then you have so many days in between each step by law that we have to go by. So one of the things we need to think about is, even though the end of the year balance may be at this point, we will always continue to drop July, August, September, and October. So we'll need to predict out what that general fund balance is. Another thing to think about is that general fund balance has some restricted funds in there as well that we cannot tap into. So 1 month, Mrs. Osborne, can you refresh my memory this year? Was it September when our balance was, our actual cash on hand was 1.3? And was that August or September?
I want to say
September is what I believe. So in September, you see that we've got a 2.2 up there, but when you pull out the restricted funds that we're not allowed to touch, we actually, if you'll remember, or if you'll pull back up from e-meeting at some point, that September financial report, we had cash on hand at 1.3 at the end of that month after we paid our bills. Mrs. Satterley? So the next piece, and this is something to think about as we work on a budget for our district, is contingency. So we hear a lot about 2%. Well, districts need to be at 2% contingency. And the state states that we have to be at 2%. For us, if we look at our FY19 annual expenses, 2% of that is $318,000, 5% is $795,000. Our current monthly payroll is right at $1.2 million. So we really, in Danville schools, even though the state's not going to, state anything, or their kind of rule of thumb is stay 2% or above, we in Danville really need to stay 9% above in order to meet monthly payroll. Of course, that is just payroll, and that's on average. There are some months, as you heard Mrs. Osborne state, we were at 1.3 this month. 4 times a year, we pay out stipends for extra duties and coaching stipends, and so it's a little bit higher in those months and a little bit lower in some other months, and so depending on when those stipends are paid out, that will fluctuate somewhat, but if you average out 12 months over the last several years, you average right at 1.2 million last year and the year before. And so a couple of other, and you heard Mrs. Osborne in the vendor reports talk about some of our monthly expenses. On average, it's around $42,000 a month. You heard that our utilities with KU this month were right at $41. The colder months, it's higher. Of course, in the cooler months, in the hotter months, it's a little lower. So it depends on when, but if you average the 12 months, our utilities are right at $42,000 a month. And our diesel averages about around $5,000 or a little over per month as well. So it takes a good bit of cash to heat school buildings and so forth. And so that's just kind of thinking about some of our average monthly expenses and thinking about, even though the state says 2%, we need to really kind of have a different number in mind in order to really go through those monthly expenses. Mrs. Osborne, scroll for me. So in thinking about just kind of budgeting process and where we are, and if you noticed on that slide where we talked about the general fund balance for each month, and if you noticed, our numbers kind of been shrinking for good reason. We've done a lot of stuff over the past several years and had a lot of really great things going on. Our facilities are in amazing shape. Our athletic facilities are in amazing shape. But one of the things I wanted to pull out is really kind of looking at our total spending and then also looking at the accountability system through the state. So we just heard the report of the great things that are going on at the high school. So this slide is not to in any way take away from that. I think they're doing an amazing job. I think that we're going to see those numbers change drastically in the next year, and I'm very proud of the work that Mr. Bandura, Mr. Elmore, Mr. Dunn are doing currently. But I wanted us to get a really realistic look at where we are and think about where we are focusing our funds and where we need to focus our funds. So the very top row is our school district, and across the top you'll see our enrollment of students, our tax levy, our rate, our total spending, per pupil expenditure, and then the high school accountability rating, which we've already went over this year and everybody's well aware of that. Then the total score at the end. I pulled out Boyle County just because it's the county that we sit in, and a lot of people always ask. But they are a very different district, a good bit larger. They have different challenges than we do. So one of the things I did was pull out independent districts that were close to our size. So there's some other independents, but they're much, much smaller. So these are the 5 that are the closest to size in Danville. And so I'm not going to read all of these, but you can go through and see our per pupil expenditure and where each of those district ranks in the state accountability system. Are there any questions from board members about? So here's some additional, as we think about developing that draft budget, some additional pieces to consider. Now, before I talk specifically about this slide, I'm actually going to step back for 1 second and state that this is all informational again, just like last month when we presented information. Again, this is informational. So as we think about the draft budget, it's things to think about. I wanted to give the board as much information as possible to make strong decisions. But these are 2 areas that will affect our revenue and spending next year. So one thing, we're going to have a reduction in grants. So for the last few years, you've heard about the Math Achievement Grant, our Read to Achieve Grant, and our Striving Readers. All of those grants are ending within the next year. Striving Readers was a large amount. We've done some great things with Striving Readers, doing some great work with Striving Readers this year, but that grant is up in September of 2020. We have to sit out a year before we can even reapply. So we are funding at least 1 position out of Striving Readers. Mrs. Satterley, that's correct, just 1 position currently? A half of, so we're funding at least a half a position there. We are also funding a position out of both Math Achievement and Read to Achieve, which will have end dates of June of 21. So it's just something in the future to think about that's ending, and there's 2 positions in those top 2. Additional costs for us, we all know this, but just as a reminder, retirement would be around $80,000 for the FY21 year. We're basing that on FY20 staffing because we don't know what staffing will look like for FY21 yet. If staffing stayed exactly the same, that would be an $80,000 increase. That's reoccurring. That is, of course, because of a change in the state and the funding, which is why you saw that big shift in one of those earlier slides. Wausau paper, we all know that we're refunding that as well over a 3-year period. So we'll still be finishing that out in FY21. So it's $111,000 that we'll have to. That luckily is only a 3-year commitment, but the CERS is ongoing and will continue to increase for a couple of more years as well. So some other considerations. So the draft budget in January is just on Fund 1, which is our general fund. These don't necessarily sit in Fund 1. You also don't have in Fund 1 grants nor federal funding. But anyway, I wanted to just let you think about some of these things, which they're still expenses for our district or things to consider, not necessarily expenses. So our debt services, paying back our bonds, is about $1.3 million per year. Our bonding capacity is currently $1.5 million. Now, the great thing about all of that is that our facilities are sitting in very good condition. So we don't need any major work to any of our facilities. We don't need a building project nor adding on anywhere. We're in really good shape, and the board has done that. That has led to a little bit of our shrinking reserves over the past few years, but in doing that, we put ourselves in a really good position for our facilities. Capital outlay, we don't have any significant needs at this point in time. We do have some needs, but not any significant that we're going to need to tap into the bonding capacity. We should be fine there to let that bonding capacity build back up over the next few years. So this is a slide that just talks a little bit about revenue versus expenses. So instead of putting it in a chart, I just kind of tried to type it out for you kind of in a sentence form. But in 2019, We spent $368,000 on general expenses and $820 on this building, more than we took in. Now, in saying that, I know that this building was a chunk, and lots of times in budget discussions, individuals may want to talk about this building, but it would have, if you have not heard this yet, cost us a good bit more to renovate Jenny Rogers in order to move into that building than the entire purchase of this building. This building also come completely furnished, and we replaced furniture and needed equipment in our schools from this building. So we actually got an extremely good deal. It also positioned us next to the high school, but one of the main things that if you've not heard the point, it would have cost us a good bit more to renovate that than to purchase this building. So even though it dipped into our reserves this year, it was still I think a very good point for the district, and it put the district in a good position as far as facilities.
And that was something else that we had to pay cash for, because there weren't students in the building. Even though there are some students in this building, we weren't allowed to bond that.
That's exactly right. The Department of Education would not let us bond this building. Yes.
I'd also like to add is we really didn't have a choice. The state decided that the building wasn't acceptable anymore, and it wasn't. We had to move, and it was wonderful that this opportunity came up.
Yes, so Mr. Smiley's talking about our old facility on the KSD campus. The state had actually surplus that building, and so we were on a very limited time frame to get out of that building for our central office. Yes. In 2018, we spent $811,000 more than we took in. Now in 17, we actually took in that you see the $869,000 more than we spent. So we actually ended up in the positive in 17. Now I don't have 16 and 15, but in the later slide I will show you that out of the last 5 years, we have actually spent more than we've taken in. 17 is the 1 year out of the last 5 that we actually took in more than we spent, and I have that on a later slide that we can talk about that. And this slide is talking about general funds. So, Mrs. Osborne, thank you. So the next several slides I want to focus on salaries, payroll for the district. So KDE recommends that a payroll should be within 74% to 78% of your total general fund budget. Danville for the past 4 years has been over 80%. I won't read each one, but you can see we've set around 84% for the last 4 years. It actually went down some employees this year for the this past year for the FY19 year, and then in FY20 we've dropped a little bit. So that would be just slightly lower than the 83. So probably right at 83, or we haven't figured it because we won't know until we finish the FY20 year what that would be. But I think it'll be slightly lower, but still at least I would say 82.5% if I was guessing. But like I said, we're not able to figure that exact number until we finish the FY20 year. And so we have, for the last 4 years, been over that. So looking at payroll across time, I have up here total payroll FY15 all the way through fiscal year 19. Across that time, you also can see the very last column. I have where we have given a raise and where we've not. We do have, our employees have step raises each year on the salary scale. So the percentages that you see are above the step raises that our employees get each year as well. You can also see our total number of classified versus certified and how our number of employees has either increased or decreased over time across those years. That's an increase of reoccurring funds between fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 19 of $1.3 million. That's reoccurring funds for the district. So looking at our increase in our expenses, because you saw on an earlier slide where we had a couple of years that we had increases, versus our increase in payroll. So as you see in FY17 where it's in parentheses, that's a decrease. So we had $282,000 less expenses, like we were spending $282 less. In 18 and 19, this is just general expenses. you can see where we actually increase those expenses. Now, if we were looking at an earlier slide where we talked about over or under revenue or at the end of the year, this is just expense to expense, that column. So we actually spent in 17 $282,000 less than we had spent the year before, is what that is. So you'll see numbers shift slightly because I'm talking about expense to expense. So what you see here, and I'm going to go to the middle row, FY18. So we actually spent $1.1 million in FY18, more than in 17, and $953,000 of that was a payroll increase. Now there can be a lot of things. That's not necessarily just a raise. We could have hired several new teachers that had 20 years experience, you know, with a more of a salary, because you can have a 22-year teacher making $65,000, and you can have a 2-year teacher making $30,000. So sometimes, just depending on hiring practices that year, it can jump around. You also could have several retirements in one year, and those teachers be replaced with newer teachers and see a decrease. And then, of course, if you have a raise or not, that year will make a difference as well. But this line, what I wanted to point out, if you look at 18 and 19, in 2018, our payroll accounted for 84.9% of our increase in expenses. And in 2019, our payroll accounted for 64% of our increase.
And these are the years the schools were consolidating, correct? The elementary was between 18 and 19.
So FY19 would have been my first year here, and that was the first year we had the consolidation. So 19 would take into, so 18, in fiscal year 18, you still had 3 elementaries in the district. Is that, I'm making sure the sidebar conversation correct on that?
We didn't add staff for the consolidation.
We added positions. We added some positions.
I think we kept everybody that first year.
We did.
Yeah, we just kept everybody the same.
Right, but I mean, there were some new positions that we added that year.
Yeah. And also something that you'll see that's an increase in there as well is the CERS as well. Next slide. So payroll change versus revenue change. So this is actually, so before I was talking about expenses, now I'm talking about revenue, the money that we take in. And so in 17, we took in $974 additional $1,000 than we did the year before, but our payroll increased $628. And then you can see each year from there. In FY18, we increased our revenue by $320, and in FY19, our revenue only increased by $96,000. And there's a lot of things that you can consider in that. So if the home values are reassessed that year, and you could have an increase there. We did not take the 4%, we took compensating in FY19. So whether you take 4% or compensating, whether you have increases in the value of property in the district, all of those things you're taken into account when you look at those revenue increases. But as you can see, in 17, we had a fairly large increase in revenue. And remember, the state's been shrinking each year as well. But in 18, we shrunk to 320, and in 19, it was 96. So in each of those years, if you'll just read the last column, you can see our payroll increase versus our revenue increase. So our revenue actually increased more than our payroll did, because we have that huge increase in revenue in 17. But in 18 and 19, our payroll increased, like for example, in 18, our payroll increased $633,000 more than our revenue. And in 19, our payroll increased by $354,000 more than our revenue. Question?
What year was the Wausau payroll? When did they quit paying like that? And so that would have been $100,000 less, like that we were getting every year. What was that? And I know they went back to 2015 and we're refunding them for 15, 16, but what year did they stop? It was 18, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have been accounted for a bit of that.
Yeah.
$100,000.
Yeah, $100,000 of it. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? So again, here's the same slide. This is a repeat slide. This is where we need to stay between the 74 and the 78 according to KDE. And where we've been at each year. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out. So you heard earlier from our state auditor. So that's the individual, the company, Carter and Stiles, that we hire to do our state audit. And so they're really looking at a check-off list of our processes and that sort of thing. So Mrs. Osborne and I have had a CPA, another audit firm, actually come into the Danville schools over the last month and actually audit our books in a way that they were, again, kind of giving us a report on how we can improve our internal process to be really fiscally responsible and tight with our internal process, making sure that we're double checking everything, but also to look at our spending, because as I was pulling these numbers and getting a lot of questions from the board, because a lot of the board members have had different questions about over time, maybe you didn't have as much information that you were wanting, and so a lot of you have been asking questions. And so we pulled this auditor in with a lot of these questions to really look at the trends of Danville schools and our finances and what's been happening over the last several years, because we can all see back, we went back to that first slide that had our monthly general fund balance that we've been shrinking for a few years. And so really, what are the trends that is causing us to shrink there? And so through that, this auditor the CPA has actually given Mrs. Osborne and I a draft at this time, and we will get the final report to you at the next board meeting. But in the draft, I want to quote one of the findings in the draft. So one of the findings for this CPA is that payroll costs are at 84%. And I'm quoting this from the draft of this final report. The district should implement procedures to reduce payroll costs from 84 to 78 of the total expenditures. The district should evaluate whether or not they should replace employees that retire, and the district should evaluate the student-to-teacher ratio and consider bringing that ratio closer to the minimum required by state. Now, I'm not saying that's what the district necessarily needs to do, but I'm just quoting from what that auditor found, since we are a good bit above what KDE actually recommends. And then there were some other findings that I'll talk about when we get to the last slide. So the next slide actually shows if we had fallen within that range that KDE recommends, where we actually would have been. So in 17, our total payroll from general fund, you can see is 11.8 million there. If we had been at the minimum for the state of what they think is that healthy range, we should have actually been around 10 million, which we were 1.4 over, if we had been sitting at 74. If we were sitting at the 78%, which is the top end, we should have been at 10.9 million. That year in 17, we were at 11.8. So the maximum the state says we should have been at was 10.9 in 2017. We were over $844,000 for payroll, according to what the state says is at the upper end of your payroll versus your general fund. And I'm not going to read each one, but that just kind of lets you know where we were each of those years, where we should have been if we were at the minimum or the maximum per state recommendation, and then what we were over in each of those years when we were sitting at that 84%. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about budget process. And so what you see here on this slide is not necessarily a fast rule, but it's just a good budgeting process. So if you even just think about in home expenses, you know, if your salary is $100 and you're spending, you know, $110, at some point you dip into your savings that $10 too frequently, and it drains down into your savings account in your home. And so one of the things that I started looking at when I was looking at how we were seeing a shrinking reserve within our district is, with Mrs. Osborne's help, we pulled from E-Meeting what the board had been given, like the information that you were giving as you worked on budgets across time. And so if you see in the middle column, this was what the approved working budget was for general fund only for each of those years. So this is what the board approved. What you see in the first column is the revenue from the prior year. So the very first row is fiscal year 15. So that's the revenue from fiscal year 14. So the district in fiscal year 14 took in for just general fund. We're not talking about federal. We're not talking about special grants, talking about just our general fund revenue, our tax dollars from our local taxpayers, the 16.9 million there. The one thing that the board was not given was that first column. So you were looking at a working budget that was presented to you of the 18 million, and then you were also given information on what the schools were requesting and what the schools were wanting. But the one piece we didn't see and what the board was given was that first year. You know what? We're approving this $18 million budget, but hey, the year before, this is actually what we took in. So we know that we're an independent district and we're landlocked. So unless we actually see that we have some construction going on, there's an apartment complex going up, we've got some new large businesses going in, we might see some slight increases in our revenue, but more than likely, if we're not seeing some major construction in our district, we're not going to see huge jumps in our revenue. But yet, that was one piece. So I'm saying this kind of in the board's defense, as I've really dug deep and looked, I've not necessarily seen that comparison to the year before. Now, when we get on to September, we can make projections because we've set our tax rate. But when you were looking at the draft budget in January and the tentative budget in May, you weren't necessarily looking at what was the revenue from the year before. As we do our draft budget in May, one of the things we need to consider is that by the time we do that tentative budget in May, we've already given the schools their allocation. Site-based has already made plans. They've already decided on the positions that, the positions they've been given, what they're going to use those positions for, and we've already started posting for hire. So we have literally, by the time we approve the tentative budget in May, we've started hiring personnel. Well, you just saw from multiple slides that that's the biggest piece of our budget. So we really need to nail down a budget that doesn't have to be exact, but it needs to be fairly close and conservative. In January, we can always add back in if we see at some point that we are going to have more revenue in that next year. But once you pass that in May, in January, you're not able to really take back much if you see that your revenue is going to be less when you hit May because you've already set your salary and your personnel in place. And that column's the piece that's been missing for the board in your January draft and your May tentative. You can see each year, that's what was over budgeted each year as we went into the school year. Next slide, please. So now I'm looking at general fund budget versus actuals. So now we have the actual revenue that we had that year. So the very first row, you're looking at FY15's actual revenue, and you're looking at general fund spending. That number comes from our annual financial report, which is what you just heard for the FY19 year from our auditor. That's where this number actually comes from, and the revenue comes straight from that report as well. So as you can see, over the last 5 years, we have overspent 4 of the 5 years, and in 17 we actually saved some money. We added back into our reserves in 17, but out of the other 5 years we've actually went over and shrunk our reserves slightly. So a couple of things to consider. Now the calendar committee has looked at this and seen this, and at the end I'm going to show you some options, and I will let you know what the calendar committee and Mr. Becker has served on that this year, so he can also add it in, and Mr. Ballard's in the back, and he can add in. But some of the things I wanted to look at as well is our school calendar and what we are actually, how many days do teachers work, how many days do our students actually have instruction, and so forth. So as you can see, 46 districts in the state of Kentucky have teacher contract days for 187 to 189 days. 28 have 186 days, and 98 districts have teacher contracts for 185 days. The state minimum is 185. The state says you have to have your teachers contracted for 185 days. Danville currently sits at 187. So here's instructional days. So here we see that 8 districts in the state have their students in session, in instruction for 171 days. The state minimum is 171 days. Only 8 districts do that. Currently, that's us. So if I had my clicker, I'd click back and forth, but I'm not going to ask you to roll, but if we roll back, we would see that we actually are on the higher end of the days that we have teachers here, but we're on the lower end of the days that we have students in instruction. Now, don't get me wrong, planning, I was a teacher. I spent 12 years in the classroom. There is not a lot more valuable than your planning time and doing what you do during your planning time to make sure you have strong instruction. But there's also a ton of value in having our students in school for instruction. And we are one of 8 districts that only has our students here for 187 school days. And you can see the rest. It goes from 172 up to 177. Looks like the most districts at 49 instead of 175 instructional days. And you can see where they play out on the rest of that. Goals 1 through 3 in our strategic plan are about improving academic achievement, closing the achievement gap for our students that struggle the most. But yeah, we have our students only in instruction 171 days. So just a couple of things. The calendar and the contract days are laid out in our policy 8.3. That policy states that we do have 187 those contract days. The 2 extra days that we have are currently used for planning days by our teachers. Those days, but 2 days extra cost us $106,000. A 1 day extra, of course, would be $53,000. Currently, those planning days are not aligned to our strategic plan, but we are working on that for the FY 21 year. There are some options for the calendar. They're very I should have put a box around it, I apologize. But at the upper left corner, you see currently what Danville Schools does. They have students for 171 days. We've talked about that. Teachers have 187 contract days. And you can see how those days are broke down. So teachers have 16 days without students throughout the year. I put 3 options up just for the board to think about. Now, the calendar committee actually forms the calendar, but the board is the one that actually sets policy 8.3 and the number of contract days for teacher. That's a board decision. So option 1 actually increases instruction, but it decreases to teacher days. So you would add, so students would go to 173, they would get 2 additional days of instruction. The teachers would drop back to 185, which would give them 12 total days without students. In that, it says that was a savings of 106, because I mentioned that's what those 2 days cost. I would not ask for that to be a savings, like if the board said they like that option. And again, these are all options. This is no decision making for the board tonight. This is just giving information. But I would ask that if the board said, oh, we actually like option 1, that $106,000 be redirected to focus on instruction for students and really putting it in places that our strategic plan is focused on to improve academic achievement. Like, for example, one of the things that Mrs. Satterley and I are working on is a new teacher induction program. So our new teachers would have 2 days at the beginning of the year, and then across the year, each month, they would have professional development in the afternoon, and that would allow us to pay those teachers to actually monthly have time after school to focus on things that new teachers really need help with, so that our new teachers move from okay to good and good to great much faster than they do currently. Option 2 would increase student instruction days by 3. Would decrease or subtract a contract day from teachers by 1. That would save the district $53,000, which again could be redirected to a new teacher induction program and professional development in the summer to help teachers focus on learning the new standards with things like common assessments, with things like pacing guides, and really that curricular work that we so desperately need to do in our district to really help us achieve those goals that Mr. Elmore talked about in his school improvement plan and the goals that we have in our strategic plan. Option 3 does not reduce any teacher days, but it adds 4 instructional days for students across time. And you can see each of those options actually provides teachers 12 days without students. And Mr. Ballard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the calendar committee actually liked option 3.
Yes, we are looking at submitting 2 versions of option 3.
Mr. Baker, you were at that meeting. Is there anything you have
I don't think we agreed with the 175 days. I think we agreed with 174. Now, as far as coming up as far as the calendar committee, they didn't have a clue on what the cost about dealing with teacher contracts. I mean, the goal of the committee was to come up with a calendar.
Yes.
And so, but it was met with enthusiasm on increasing from 171 to 174. And the committee felt like that was a pretty fair thing to do, seeing that it was quite a jump, taking away from 10 professional days down to 6. So, I mean, there was concern of one of the committee members on how am I going to make that up? They counted on those days for professional development. So I think as far as the calendar committee, we were charged with a calendar and not necessarily worrying about what the 187 versus a 185. But I think the 174 was met enthusiastically.
And so just information at this point. So the next thing we're going to look at is extra duty stipends. And again, just like where we looked at athletic stipends last month, this is just informational. Now, one of the things just I want to point out, so Hogsett and Tolliver, they do have extra duty stipends for clubs. And the two schools last year when we consolidated, they got together, and the 3 old elementaries actually had some clubs and activities after school, and they had this particular pot of money. And so we pulled the 2 principals together and said, here's the total pot of money from these 3 schools. What do you think your school needs or wants, and what does that look like? And so those 2 principals sat together, and Hogs was like, you know, we just don't need that much. We're not going to have that many activities for K1. And so they actually let Tolliver have more. So there's a discrepancy in the amount of money, but that was decided on principals. They actually both went back and talked to their teachers at the time, and then they came back to the table and said, this is what we want. So this is complete decisions at the school level. It's based on the same amount of stipend funds that those grade levels had prior to consolidation. And so at Mary G. Hogsett, you can see the clubs that they have, and each one is $500, and it totals $3,000. At Tolliver, we have a few more, but like I said, a lot more students, some older students, and so you can see the clubs that we have down through there. I know that Mrs. Kelly does a survey with her faculty at the beginning of the year to determine who is willing to sponsor a club and what they would like it to be and what they would provide. And those stipends are based on time and whether or not they, whether or not they competed in any way or not. So there's $10,500 that we see there at Tolliver. So Bate in the high school, I've broken it into 2 slides. So as you know, once you departmentalize in a school, you usually will have a department chair based on subject matter or grade level. And so I've broken both of those schools down into clubs and activities, or teams that are competing on one slide, and then their academic support, like their department chairs, on the next slide. And so here at Bade, I'm not going to read them, but you can see the activities and the teams that they have and how much those stipends break out to. And your total is $12,600 for those. At Bade, that's 13 positions, so 13 people there doing that work. And then I just call this classroom stipends, but this is like your department chairs and your teacher leads, and it's $4,500. One of the things you'll see when we get to the high school for this page is that their department chairs are receiving $1,000, but what we've done is broke the $1,000 up here because it's very important that that 6th grade group has meetings and discusses things about that 6th grade group, as well as, well, sometimes we need the math team meeting, but sometimes we need that 6th grade team meeting. So they're broken out that way so they can have more discussions depending on what the topic is there. And you see that totals $4,500. High school extra duties. So a lot of these some of you probably had when you were in school: student council, yearbook, journalism. So a lot of those, and that totals $47,585. We have a lot of great activities that go on at the high school extra duty stipends. And then, like I said, teacher leads is $1,000, so that's each subject area at the high school, which totals $7,000. So the total for the extra duty stipends at all three schools is $85,185. And then the last slide, this was, since we had a lot of information for this presentation, since we actually have to approve that draft budget in January, I do think that I am very open to, as we weed through a lot of information, if the board needs to have a special call, if there's more information that you want, I'm glad to do that and pull any information. But this was the presentation that we had last month on the athletic stipends, and just a reminder of that total. And then next slide. So here's kind of the hard part. So one of the things as we move into working on a draft budget for fiscal year 21 is we need to really think about some of those earlier slides to where we were budgeting more than our revenue was expected to be. We've been overspending. Now, in saying that, we have absolutely put our district in a really nice place with a lot of things like our athletic facilities, our academic facilities, and a lot of other really good things have been going on in our district. Amazing arts program, we've championship sports programs, so we've got a lot of really good things going on. But also realistically, we cannot keep overspending. We need to really think about that last year when we looked at August, September, and October, what our general fund balance was and what our cash flow was in those months. So my recommendation as superintendent is to make some cuts in our budget this year. Also, as I had, remember that I talked about that second auditor that I had brought in to really look at our processes and help us look at our trends over time. I asked him what some of the top things were that we needed to look at or think about. And he said payroll, number one, our sub-pay, which I can explain in a minute. He actually mentioned sports, and then maintenance and facilities. And so that's from the CPA as he just looked at spending and trends over time. He took a very deep look at the past 3 years. Some things he dipped back a year or two before that, but he mainly focused on the last 3 years and in a couple of places at FY 15 and 16. So overall, I would recommend that we reduce spending by 3%. That our draft budget that we look at and that the board approves in January be less than our FY 20 revenue, the income that we have coming in. That we eliminate overtime, with the exception of emergencies. We actually had $47,000 this past year in overtime. Lots of times it was because it was convenient just to ask this person to work even though they had already worked 40 hours, when maybe we had somebody that had only worked 35 hours that week and could have done that. So really focusing on that it's only emergencies when that's the only person that can do that job. We have a lot of employees that do not work 40 hours a week that would be glad to have those extra hours when needed. And that we try to focus as many professional trainings in-house as much as possible. Mrs. Satterley and I have been talking about that extensively. Every individual that evaluates certified employees in the district has to have evaluation training every year. This past year, each of us traveled to one of those trainings. Mrs. Satterley and I will work on having that done in-house this year, and that will put down a pretty significant amount of travel. And then really evaluate our spending and reduce slightly across all areas. I'm not suggesting in any way that any program in our district is cut or impacted significantly. What I'm suggesting is that we look at all areas and think about where we can reduce slightly across all areas so that we bring our budget into line and that we have a balanced budget as we move into the fiscal year 2021. I also know that we need to focus on instruction. If you remember that slide where we looked at those other independent school districts. Our high school is at ATI status. We have a group that is so dedicated and working very hard, and all the teachers at the high school right now to turn that around. But they are going to need some help and support from the board and the central office, and we really need to focus on instruction. And so to do that, one of the things I think the calendar committee has already said, yeah, we need to have more instructional days in our school, and I think that's very important. And I'm so proud that our calendar committee said, hey, let's look at this strongly, so that we do focus all of our attention and as much as possible on instruction and aligning the things that we are doing with our strategic plan. And then possibly if we did, or if the calendar committee or the board thought about reducing one contract day, that we targeted that towards that focus on instruction. Now, before, don't move yet, Mrs. Osborne, but the next slide, there is no way Mrs. Osborne and I can present a draft budget for consideration to our board in January if we haven't done extensive work over the last 6 months. So like I said, I've had tons of meetings, principals, directors, and we've talked very specifically about areas that we could possibly cut. I know that several of our schools already have some changes or thoughts on how they could change their master scheduling for FY21 to help us balance our budget. And so through that, I have listed a few things only as thought process, only for consideration. I'm not asking the board to make any decisions tonight. What I would like for you to do is look at the list and ask more questions. There's a couple of things on the list too that I don't have enough information on, and I'll point one out here in just a minute. If you go ahead, Mrs. Osborne, and go to the next slide. So in order for us to do 3% to cut 3% of our budget, so that we have a budget that is in line with our revenue, and that actually will help us add a little bit back into our revenues, so that our cash flow in those lean months is still enough to meet our monthly expenses. These are all possibilities. Payroll, $865,000. We have teachers retire every year through natural attrition, people that go to other districts and teachers that retire. We would be very close to that. Anybody that wants to be in Danville schools that the principals would want to bring back that have strong performance, I don't see them going anywhere with this proposal. If our principals feel like they have been strong, then they would be back. We always have 6-7 teachers retire. Those are teachers at the top end of the pay scale. So substitute salary scale, one of the things here that says a $40,000 savings. So in Danville schools, we have been paying certified substitutes on their daily maximum threshold, which means they're getting paid at the rate of the day they retired. So we are the only district that I know of that does this. Now, I've not polled every district in Kentucky, but I've checked with quite a few, and I know Mrs. Osborne has, and our auditor who audits multiple schools doesn't know of anyone. So basically, most school districts will have their substitute teacher scale of pay, and it's usually a maximum of around $100 or $110 a day. But in Danville schools, we have been paying our substitute teachers on their daily threshold, which could be upwards of $300 to $380 a day. So now, I would suggest, though, that if we change that policy and we have a maximum for a day, whatever the board wanted to, I think most districts max is $110, that if we have a substitute that's a long-term sub, that we actually do pay them on their daily threshold, because we're going to ask them to grade papers at night, and we're going to ask them if there's an open house to attend that and have that teacher's room open for that teacher. So if we do have teachers on a long-term sub situation to where they're doing extra work like the teacher, then keep that policy. But if last year we had had the $110,000 maximum for only the short-term subs, a day or two here or there, we would have saved $40,000. I've already talked about overtime. We did $47,000 last year, so I'm estimating $45,000 as a cut. Chromebook replacement, we could move about $10,000 of that to title funds, so it's not really a reduction, but a movement in where we could shuffle some money from title and federal funding. Maintenance and repair, I think we could save around $40,000 there. Athletics, we saw the $360,000 on stipends and equipment and other things as well, and I think we could save around $19,400 there. The athletic trainer, that's the one that I said I'm not sure on. It's been mentioned to me that possibly be cut it. It's been mentioned to me it's valuable, we don't need to. And that's all been in the last week that was brought to my attention. I'll be honest with you, I've not had time to do a ton of research on it. I think that's something between now and January that we need to gain more information on. trainings in-house I mentioned already. Outside training reimbursement, so really monitoring any trainings that happen outside of the district, that they have pre-approval before we reimburse for any type of trainings, or to make sure that our policy is really tight there. The 36 was actually, that's seek funds to schools. In the state of Kentucky, school district gives a school between $100 per student and $140. Again, Danville was giving the schools a maximum of $140. That's the max in the state. The majority of districts do not give the $140. The majority of districts are sitting around $120. Quite a few just do the $100 minimum. Now, that's not saying we're going to let our schools go without if they actually need something. If we did the 120 allocation versus the 140, and a school needed something specifically, they could come to the board and present that on a case-by-case basis. I've talked with the principals about creating a budget at the 120 mark, and could you manage that? And so they've been working on what does that budget look like and managing that at that point. That saves around 36.6. We talked about the contract days. National Board Salary Scale, I don't have a number there, but what I wanted to point out there on that one is that we in the past, Danville schools, did not reimburse or put teachers on the new salary scale if they did national board and it was not in their area. We currently have 3 certified employees that have national board, and they're getting that pay bump, which is $2,500 a year, but it's not in their area. Those 3 individuals cost us, it's $7,500 total for them, so $2,500. So I absolutely say, don't do anything. I mean, leave those folks alone. We grandfather them in. They've been put there, but that's only changed in the last 2 years in Danville schools. Other school districts do not do that. If a teacher gets national board and they're on that salary scale, it's in their area, and that's what other districts do. I've not found a district, I don't think Ms. Osborne's found a district that actually reimburses teacher for national board when it is out of their area. So that's $7,500 current reimbursement that is, salary scale that is reoccurring for 3 individuals in our district that's not in their area. So that was new to Danville, I think 2 years ago. So I would suggest that Danville reverts that back because other districts do not practice that. Now, the reason there's not anything there is because that would just prevent that from happening in the future. It would not affect anybody currently in our district. Because I would ask, and I'm sure you would agree, to grandfather in the 3 individuals that are already on that. Yeah. Academic stipends, we saw it was a low number to begin with, but there are about, I think we skipped 5,500. Some of those, I don't know if you noticed, one of them was to be determined. We actually don't have anybody in that area anyway, so it's not something that's being used. There is $1,000 at 2 of the schools for web design and social media, but we have library media specialists and we have technology resource teachers that should be a part of their job description to really manage that social media and that web design. So there's $2,000 there that can be saved because we have people that's part of their job to do that piece. So that's $2,000 of the $5,500. So there's not a huge impact there, but it's a little bit. And so if we totaled up all of those, for some reason, if it was like, yes, it's all of those, it would be 1.2 million. I asked the CPA that was just in our district, for us to be healthy and move our reserves back to where it needs to be, what do you suggest? What should our budget look like? And he told Mrs. Osborne and myself 1.1 million to 1.5. To get us back to a healthy place within 3 years. So, Mrs. Osborne, do you want to add to that? I mean, you were in that conversation. We met with him this afternoon.
No, we didn't get into this overnight, and I don't want everyone to think if we cut 1.2, it'll be okay next year. I think it'll take us 2 or 3 years to get back to where we were.
So questions, even if it's just, can can you look into this between now and January? We want to see numbers on this. I mean, we're glad to. We have spent hours researching, hours meeting with individuals to get information. We have dug through boxes of old financial reports. We have pulled down the number of documents from e-meeting back to 2014-15. It's quite a bit. I know we probably didn't hit absolutely everything. We're glad to research and find any other information that you would need. Again, this is all informational at this point.
Mr. Son, he's not looking, but you can help.
Go ahead. I'd just like to make a few comments. I have the Danville Schools policy 4.1 for budget planning and adoption. The planning portion, superintendent will establish procedures to provide for community, parent, professional, school, where appropriate, student input to the development of recommendations should be considered for the district budget. These procedures shall include a needs assessment process to identify, confirm, reassess, and prioritize recommendations regarding district goals for future financial emphasis. The plan shall provide for assessing the achievement of established goals and academic exceptions of the district. I know that's a lot of words, but basically, Dr. McDonald has met that already. She's met with a lot of people. She's studied we have a lot of data we need to look at, and that part, in my opinion, is over. I think that you would like to have input for the next section. I'd like to read the next section so there's no confusion. And she can't do the next section until we give her input on all the planning that she's given us. So let me read the preparation of the budget. The superintendent shall prepare for board consideration and action a district budget showing the amount of money needed for current expenses, debt service, capital outlay, and other necessary expenses of the schools during the succeeding fiscal year. Superintendent shall also prepare the estimated total amount that will be received from the state and the amount that will be needed to be raised on local taxation, including the rate of levy necessary to raise such amounts. The superintendent, in preparing the budget, will take into consideration educational needs of the district, along with the district's financial ability to meet those needs. So that's it. I think perhaps we ought to look at a date, to be fair with you, before the first meeting. How many days before then do you want your input to you? The next meeting is, what's the date on the next meeting in January?
13th.
In all fairness to you, so you have some time.
Yeah. It would be difficult if you wanted a large or something drastically different than what we presented in a week's time. So it would be nice by the 1st of January if you could review and think. And of course, as you are reviewing, you are welcome to call me individually, and I can pull that information and add it, send it back up to the board, or have it ready for the work session in January as well. So would love for you to, as you think of things and have questions, send those on to me again so that we can be working on it ongoing too as well.
What would that date be again?
Well, I would say we would need things by the 1st of January, 2nd or 3rd.
I have a compliment for the superintendent. I've been involved in 13 former budgets. This is in-depth. Excellent job on your preparation. Excellent.
Well, I just want to say, this is my 3rd year going through this, and this is by far more information than I've ever received. And not knowing the starting and ending things, I don't want to go back, I want to look forward, but that would have been nice to kind of know, and could be compared year to year, but last year we spent this, and last year, this year we spent this, and we're not much difference, but there was a difference when you are going that way. But I appreciate the candidness and bringing all aspects of education. I don't want anybody in our district to think, I mean, this is just a cash flow issue. We have a lot of assets, we're having things that, and this is not something that, you know, can't be done. I mean, it seems like a lot when you start adding up numbers and things like that, but 3% is doable. And, you know, that's why, and I don't want this to go to the taxpayer, because if we don't do this, this is going to end up being a situation where we're going to have to increase in order to keep that tax flow or cash revenue up. And so that's something I don't want. So if we can be healthy on this end, then we can be, you know, more modest or, you know, make those tough decisions when they come. But I think, you know, this is not a fun discussion. This is not the fun part of being on the board. This is, you know, but having all the information makes me so much more comfortable. I mean, in the past, a lot of you know, I've asked a lot of questions and I haven't gotten the answers. And so this is really good that, you know, I feel like, and I've been calling poor Tammy a lot in the past few days and say, you know, tell me more about this. Like, what is this? And now I kind of understand more. And, you know, that this is an impact and or how this will impact our students, because really that's what we want for them. And we've heard over the past year how wonderful we are financially. I mean, we just did a great audit. We've had the bonding guys say you all are in wonderful shape. This is just a cash flow thing, and this can be done, not easily, but it can be done, and then we'll be, you know, healthy. And you know, the first year will probably be the most changes, but if we just continue and have that trend, then we'll be financially, you know, on a good path. Thank you.
Now, I do thank the superintendent for the report. None of this is easy. This is also something that we can't ask the taxpayers to bail us out every year. Just can't. It's something our responsibility is that if we can accomplish 3/4 of these cuts, then we're obligated to do that. We owe it to them. So we will work on this with due diligence. Some parts of it I don't agree with, but that's, like I said, it's discussion at this point. We have to look down the road. When you read about independent districts going out of business, it's 90% because of finances. When you start getting up where some of these districts were at $1.22 per 100, it was impossible to keep up. We're not there. I'm comfortable with the presentation, but I also know we need to look at this as not a reduction, but as a looking at how we're going to keep our future bright. So I know there are things on here we haven't looked at. There's like transportation. There's still other issue or other things that we could be looking at also as cutting. And it's going to be a healthy process. Not going to be pleasant all the time, but it will be for the betterment of the school district. So I do thank you for your report. Anybody else have any comments?
One question: now that we have a new administration in Frankfurt, when do we typically get their budget numbers? Like, I know education is in the news every day, and should they, you know, increase or seek funds or something like that, that would help us out as well. When do we typically get those? Just can you remind me? Do we know? I mean, it always seems to come too late.
It's like April.
Right. I just was curious, just because it's in the news every day.
And this time of the year is when we get, well, like January, February, we get our adjustments received.
Right.
Well, and also part of the headlines is that the former administrations left the state at a $1.1 billion deficit, that we should not be counting on any exceptional monies coming from the state, because that obviously means the state barely is paying the bills. Mm-hmm. So it really was distressful when those numbers came out. I felt like we were cheated as taxpayers and not really being told what the situation is. In comparison to that, we are telling not only our staff, parents, and taxpayers, we are telling them what our situation is. And I think that kind of honesty and transparency is definitely needed. So I don't want to go along the lines of what former administration did. I want us to do what Danville needs to do. And so we're gonna take this, make it right, and we're gonna be okay. So I assure you, we will do that. So, but just don't count on any new dollars from the state. So if it happens, it's a windfall.
Amen.
Anybody else have comments?
No.
Questions, concerns, Teresa?
We did look at transportation since you mentioned that, and their numbers have stayed the same. They've done really good.
And there's no large expenses on the horizon, like we're in our bus fleet's in great shape, you know.
Well, we still have to stay on the schedule
Right.
for the bus fleet, but transportation is the one area that stayed constant.
Well, and one thing we always did, when we allocated for buses, we paid cash. And that's just not necessary. KISTA has great financing situations. It eases general fund expenditures, and it still accomplishes everything we need to accomplish. So we haven't bought buses now for 2 years. And so that's kind of not been the norm. But our fleet's in really good shape. And those kind of expenditures at $110,000 to $120,000 a bus, you have to really look at where we are and can we hang on another year? But we also cannot get back to where we were years ago when we didn't buy buses on a regular basis, and then it became very expensive for us to get caught up.
Yeah, and one of the things we have to consider too is the rule of thumb for buses is we really don't want a bus on a day-to-day route that's over 10 years old. We can legally do that, but we really don't. It's not best practice. And so if you think about that, we need 13 routes. We still are looking for bus drivers. If anybody would like to apply, please do so. And so we're running 11, we need 13. And in doing that, if you just think, if you have 13 buses that you need on the ground at all time, then you don't need a bus that's over 10 years old. That's 1 bus per year, and 2 buses 2 years. So we've kind of been stretching that 10-year mark. We will need to buy a bus. I do think your point about KISTA, that's we've already discussed that. That's already in our budget plans. But just to keep us under 10 years on routes, we will need to purchase a bus.
Like I said, I do appreciate the report, and it's time for us to go to work. And so we'll make it a goal to have information to you so that we can have another discussion on it. I'm saying we stick with the work session on the 13th. So, anyways. All right. So let's go to the consent agenda. We need a motion, please.
I make a motion to approve all consent items as presented.
Second.
Before I can vote, I'd like to share some information about consent agenda, please.
Okay.
When I looked at the consent agenda, I was concerned about the Tolliver Gym with an employee having people from the community come in and play soccer. I'm in complete support of that. My only concern is this, and I'll read what so I don't say it wrong. In the event of an injury, participants will be responsible for medical services from their own insurance. The Danville Independent Schools will not be liable for injuries. If we're going to have a group of folks playing soccer in an indoor gym, which is not a very big field, the ball hits the wood very hard and moves very fast. People are moving fast, and I think that we should let them be in there, but I would respectfully request that the superintendent talk with our attorney and see if we need to add that to the contract.
Yeah, and we actually have their liability insurance, so any group that we do use the facility, we require them to give us a copy of their liability insurance. So this group actually has to in their liability insurance, so we are covered.
Okay, I was just concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Okay, I think we have one person here that would like to speak to the board, and that is Mrs. Clevin.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Teresa and Dr. McDonald that presentation. That was wonderful. Can we get a copy of it? Would that be possible to see it?
Yes.
I was just gonna come to make a plea for a reading program called Lexia for Hogsett. That was all I wanted, but now I've got lots of other things, so I think I just am gonna reserve comments for later, and I want to get some more information about things and maybe come back. But Lexia is a really good program, and I think Hogsett and the little people need it.
Well, I've heard really great things about the program.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right, last on the agenda is to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion and second. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you all.